Hi everybody, it's David Porter, and today I want to talk about classical theory of criminology. When I was a student, I took a course in social problems, and the professor presented a variety of theories as to why people do some of the things they do that are so self-destructive, that hasten entropy, that create chaos, that hurt not just other people but themselves in the process. And we went through a long list of theories, from labeling theory, learning theory, conformity theory, nonconformity theory, strain theory, differential association theory, and then you have, psychological theory of criminality, and sociological and various biogenetic theories that account for why people do things like child maltreatment and domestic violence, robbing banks, rape, killing, vandalism, assault, burglary, theft, all the things that create chaos in a society and that victimize people and that harm the individual in the process. And at one point I realized something. All of these theories placed the responsibility onto society, or internal psychological problems, or just what you were born with. And I raised my hand and I asked, isn't anything just anyone's fault? What about personal responsibility? What about accountability for one's own actions? What about looking at factors within the individual instead of within society? What about not excusing individuals' behavior, except in the case of severe chronic mental illness, where people are debatedly without free will, or making very, very poor choices based on delusions and psychotic processes. I mean, I think that is about the only real exception. And I asked, isn't anything just anyone's fault? And the professor said, rather dismissively, well, that's classical theory. We're really not going to get into that. And that was all that was said about it. So now, years later, when I'm the one teaching the class, I really want to make sure my students understand classical theory, and I want to do more than just dismissively mention it and discard it. And I think that our society might improve just a little bit if there was more individual responsibility, because today individual responsibility has pretty much gone out the window, and we live in a very entitled, I can do whatever I want, say whatever I want type of society without any consequences. And of course, this doesn't apply if you're on Twitter. Of course there are social consequences, but there's just an overriding sense of entitlement that you should be able to do whatever you want, and that as long as it's your choice, it's okay. Moral relativism. I don't agree with that. I have a very different point of view. Classical theory was developed back in the mid 1700s or so. I don't recall the exact date. I don't really think it's important. And it is the radical notion that criminals are responsible for their actions due to their abuse of free will. And the premises of classical theory are human beings are rational creatures. Our intellect operates over our emotions, I over E. And since then, neuroscience has established that the right frontal lobe, this part of the brain right behind the right side of the forehead, is the seat of manners and good judgment and long-term consideration of consequences, inhibition. This is the part of the brain that says, sit down, shut up, back off, close your mouth, bad idea, don't go there, think it over, do you really want to go do this? It's an inhibitory part of our brain, and it's a very important that we listen to it, because by listening to it, we are going to be sane. We will take action that diminishes entropy, that reduces chaos, that imposes order on chaos instead of increasing it, and just doing whatever the fuck you feel like, which is here in the limbic system, the emotional part of your brain, or you know what, in a psychodynamic theory, what Freud called the id and the superego. The id is the immature, irresponsible, emotional, irrational part of the brain that I have, that we all have. I'm totally not judging. I'm just describing it. I've got it. I absolutely have it. We all have it. And Freud said that those very primal instincts of instant gratification, which is necessary in the infant in order to ensure their survival. If their needs are not met, they are going to become very emotional and very upset and draw the attention of their caregivers so they can get their needs met for survival. It's critical for survival. Now, as we grow, as we acquire experiences, and hopefully we get good guidance from what Freud said was society, from our peers, from our parents, our family, our neighbors, our community, our culture, we integrate all these experiences, and our superego gets activated. And the superego is the polar opposite of the id. It dials everything down. The id, I want, gimme, and I want everything I want right now. That's an infant's behavior, a child's behavior. Hopefully it starts diminishing as you become a teenager and a young adult. As a mature adult, and you can be mature. I've met 15-year-olds that were more mature than 40-year-olds. Hopefully as you grow older, you become more mature, you start making better choices and better decisions, and you integrate these messages from society, and you start controlling yourself. Neurologically, you're actually building more inhibitory synapses here in the right frontal lobe that help you take it down and help you regulate. So classical theory says we are rational creatures, and given that we are rational, we are also responsible. Our intellect gives us great power, and with great power it comes responsibility. So according to this theory, we are constantly weighing options. According to this theory, human beings are what are called rational calculators. And I put it very simply to a lot of the offenders I see in therapy. Always ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Do you really want to go there? Is it worth it? There are going to be consequences for your actions of one sort or another, and at one point or another. Is it worth it? Do you want to go there? Slow down, take a breath, and just think. Ask yourself if you really want to do this. If you have to do it, if this is the time and place to do it, if you're the one to do it, ask yourself these questions. And the answer is maybe not. Maybe I'm not the one, maybe not right now. Dial it back a little bit. Activate that right frontal lobe. And then you have the aspects of the theory that say because humans are rational creatures, because we are rational calculators and we have free will, when we do things we shouldn't do, we're responsible. We're responsible to society, to our fellow man, to ourselves. And you have to you have to be held accountable. And classical theory says punishment is justified. Punishment must be swift, and it must be equivalent to the severity of the infraction. Okay, you don't. I'm sitting in a gas station parking lot right now. People do this all the time. Well, not so much anymore because now you have to prepay. But before you prepaid, it was common to pump gas and then drive off, steal gas. Now that's a shitty thing to do, but you can't really justify capital punishment for stealing a tank of gas. But I think there absolutely needs to be accountability, and there need to be consequences for it. You also just can't get away with it. The punishment must be delivered proportionate to the offense, and it must be delivered promptly. Because here is where behavioral psychology and classical theory concur. In order for a punishment to be effective, it has to be delivered swiftly. It has to be in temporal proximity. In other words, very close to the time of the offense. The offense is discovered. There's evidence for the offense is prosecuted. A verdict of guilty is handed down. The punishment must be immediate. And then, hopefully, you internalize that process of punishment. You learn from it. It adjusts and refines your superego a little more. It adjusts and refines your id a little bit more. And you move on and you act differently. I mean, that's the theory. Personally, I like classical theory because of its emphasis on individual responsibility, and it doesn't produce excuses. Because here's something I've learned, and I've had offenders tell me this. You cannot ever give offenders permission to proceed. You can never allow offenders to move forward and repeat their criminal acts or escalate their criminal acts. And I have had offenders tell me this. I've had people tell me, men in their 40s and 50s who have had very hard lives of their own making by their own choice, in and out of prison. The whole thing about ex-convicts, that's so much bullshit. What's much more common are trans convicts, people who are in and out of correctional facilities, and on and off probation, parole, and house arrest, in and out of court, on and off conditions of release. It's also called doing life on the installment plan. People will spend more time inside correctional facilities than living out here in the free world. They just don't do it all at once. And I've had so many of them say, I wish someone had stopped me when I was about 15. I wish I had someone sit me down and talk to me, or correct me harder, something to get my attention and talk sense to me, and I could have had a very different life. I'd be a much better man, a much better worker, a much better father, a much better husband, a much better member of society than what I am now. And I wouldn't have so many regrets and so much shame and so much self-loathing and contempt for myself. This is what offenders have told me. This is coming right from the people who have lived this life, that they need to be held responsible for their own good. And what about the victims? Our criminal justice system has pretty much forgotten the victims. What about the victims of crimes? What about the people who have been on the receiving end of violence and theft and rape? Where's justice for them? No, they go to court and they watch their victimizer walk out of court with a desk appearance ticket, or maybe on probation, and they watch their victimizer work the system for everything they can to minimize their consequences. And it's very tempting to say that when you let offenders off so easy, when you accept their excuses, when you have psychology, sociology, criminology, even biology offering up even more excuses for their behavior, it's very easy to say, well, they don't learn anything that way. They learn a lot. What they learn, and this is right from those very theories, they learn, I can do whatever I want. I can steal a car, burglarize someone's home, beat someone up, rape a woman, rob a convenience store, rob a bank. I can do whatever I want, and no one's going to stop me. So why should I stop doing it? Because that behavior I did was fun, it was gratifying, and I enjoyed the power and dominance and control and the easy payoff it gave me. And nothing happened, so why should I stop? That's how some people think. You can't allow offenders permission to proceed for their own good as well as that of others. That, in a nutshell, is classical theory. Everyone, thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe.